Good morning.
When it comes to the issue of making
Good morning. Sorry, I'm playing a
comfortable and better and easier.
video there that I shouldn't be copying things around.
Are we off from the daylight savings time zone? Am I an hour early or an hour late? Or
You're right on time, right on time.
very good. I get nervous when we have that time change because we're not totally in phase.
Yeah, I know, it's really stupid, isn't it?
Yeah, at least you'd think we could pick the same date to have both countries switch over.
Yeah. A little bit ridiculous. Okay, I'm just trying to prepare a thing based on the Twitter discussion. Have you looked at our Twitter feed lately? There's been a few cool things.
I'll have to go through it. Oh, and I can only stay for the first hour because Mom needs me to drive her up to the DMV,
Okay.
which should be an adventure.
What's she doing at the DMV?
Well, we have to get the title of my late father's car out of his name.
Yeah, I'm many years after my father left us. I'm
That
having,
is really important.
sorry, I'm having that
Book
issue
is, of
too.
course, conforming to the most boring
Stop these
standards and
speakers. I'm just
speed
trying to take a
and
screenshot here,
we
computer.
have some interactions, of course, that are cool and useful.
Okay, here we go.
It's so hard to convince people that someone's passed away. The amount of junk mail that he's getting now is just bad, if not worse than when he was alive.
Scary, isn't it? Scary, sad, and horrible.
Every once in a while, we'll get something from my late grandfather, and his dead like decades ago.
Wow, that's pretty wild. Oh, and the room is filling up. Here I am working on a screenshot and everyone's here. Really good to see everyone.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Mark.
Mark, I'm just trying to take a screenshot based on some of that reading stuff we talked about earlier.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, it's ironic that getting enduring power of attorney is quite easy up until the point where you actually need it, at which point it's infinitely difficult. Of course, most people don't want to cede away such controls when they're still compos mentis, because why would you?
Yeah, exactly. It's an issue. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you guys. I'm not just sitting here having playtime. I'm just adding something in based on the current discussions. And I think I did it. Okay, jolly good. So who is here? Okay, excellent. So, yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about is about the guys who are not here yet, Brandel and Fabienne, because they've been doing some really good stuff on the Twitter. I'll just show you for context, since I guess most of you haven't had an opportunity to see. By the way, I'm in the wrong camera. That's also the wrong camera. Facing the wrong way. Just, yeah, slightly better lighting. So you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
So there've been all kinds of discussions on Twitter, and then over the last 2 days, Brandel says he's been playing around with just putting some of the book in what he calls a deep reader, which is white text on a black background. Obviously, just an experiment to show that the text goes in. So that's really cool. And then he refers to this other video that someone else made, which is kind of ridiculous, but impressive, having a book as an artifact in VR, which is both really stupid and really cool, I think, personally. But then we get further down, they're talking about speed reading, where you get one sentence at a time, or other assistive technologies. And Adam does this. So this is obviously a horrible view through his headset, but what he's doing is using gestures to see one sentence at a time at different lengths, which is quite cool. So oh, am I not plugged in? No, I'm not plugged in. So in our book, I just now took it into the conversations from the journal like this. So we need to look at how we can best capture some of these conversations. And while I have you here as a captive audience, this is what we discussed many times. Now, Mark and I had a kind of a in-depth discussion on layout versus flowing text, and we agree that it's complicated. There are many issues for both types. In this particular view of the book, this is, of course, based on the legacy book printing. That is our basic thing. And of course, we want to drive it further. But the thing that I've been talking to you guys about recently, the 2 arrow keys, it now works. And it's such a small thing, but in terms of usability of the book, it changes what the book is for me, because now, normally, right arrow, I read as I go through, but then I get to Andreas. And if I don't want to read it, I don't have to do this and try to see where it stops when waiting for Andy Campbell's. No. All I do, wherever I am, I do arrow down, boom, I'm at the next section. It was kind of fun when Mark and I were talking earlier today. I wanted to show him something in the book, and I found this so much faster to find the right thing than going to either this table of contents or this table of contents. There's hardly any information here. So that was kind of cool. And then I sent out an email to our wider community asking.
That went too fast. That went too fast for me.
Yeah, no,
I'm not sure which table. I'm not sure which table of contents you then found useful this morning or whenever it was.
So
which one? I mean, you showed this.
There's three ways to navigate the book now. One is, let's just start. So this is the front cover, ugly as sin currently. Then we have a very normal clickable PDF table of contents. Personally, I find that quite useless. I mean, look at you, Bob. You did what you should. You have a lot of headings. Takes a lot of space. Does that help or not? Maybe not on a table of contents while you're reading, for sure. And then we have some that have only one. It's because this is multi-people, we're going to have multi-styles. And hardly any of these headings make any real insight into what they are. I mean, maybe Eduardo, space art. Okay, get that. But Dini, metadata for Access VR and beyond, what the hell is that about? Right? It is about what she's building. So what I wanted to show, Bob, was this, just using down arrow to go to the next level. So the book itself becomes its own table of contents. So if I want to go somewhere towards the end, I just hold it down and go to, oh, I went too far, go back, boom, there it is, here's Mark's. I just think it's kind of fun that we look at so many crazy far out things, and with a simple key remapping, we have a useful thing. So that's all really. But I wanted to, see, I just did it, boom. I sent out an email to the wider community. I don't think I copied all of you because I didn't want you to have to rewrite stuff. Asking the question here. This is what I asked. Do you have a single sentence on text and knowledge work in VR which you would want to put in the book? A single sentence. And by the way, what I did there was, this is a tool for reading. It's built into Liquid, so it takes whatever text I selected with a keyboard shortcut, and it gives us a layout that's almost like a poem, break on and, comma, are, those things, double break on period. One of the benefits of PDF type media, I think, because it is frozen, there isn't that fear that I at least have, that if you do stuff with it, you may mess it up. I know that is not a real fear. There are technical reasons, but they're not real. But it would be nice to be able to build in these kinds of views, wouldn't it? So anyway, this is some of the ones we've got. It started with my friend Tom Standage. He's the deputy editor of The Economist. So I said, do you have a sentence? And he said, not really. But then he elaborated, and that's when I thought, hang on, let's see who else have something. And we got some good people. So I think going forward, maybe for the next book, we should email more people asking for a single sentence. Like Esther, she gave me a single sentence. But then some people, sorry, some layout issues to do still here, went far beyond, which is fine. Very few people from Twitter. I expected many more, but there weren't many. But then we get these surprises here. Stephen Fry. He has now written a closing thing in the book. At least in the UK, he's kind of a big deal within tech and things like that. He's done a lot of things. So that was quite fun. When I asked him to write a full piece for the first book, it took many months of chasing. This took 15 minutes of waiting. So that was just that update. Yes.
My one sentence would be, text is the most expressive control medium.
Please write that and email it, and I'll be very happy to put it in, of course.
Will do.
But here's something. Yes, sorry.
I was going to say, well, no, go ahead, Fred, and then I've observation about our earlier conversation.
No. I can wait. Yeah, go on.
Okay, I was just going to say, I mean, the other thing on reflecting on our conversation, because it's sort of, I was helping Fred with some issues on the redesign issues on authors. I haven't got talking anyway, but our conversation spread over the wider topics we've been discussing here. And one of the things that really brought me back to was the not so much the need, but the real gain in being able to separate text and style slash structure. It doesn't mean that they aren't there and they're not valid, but especially as really from now going forwards, some of our readers will not be human. That the ability to interact with the text unpolluted by things like page numbers or
page numbers are not pollution.
Sorry, they are if it says, and then page 64, we went to, which is what happens when you flatten text. So no. This is the whole point. If you separate that out, it doesn't mean you won't know what wasn't on page 64. Page 64 is not addressable. It's the fact that it's really quite shocking to see how little attempt, if any, is made by people working with digital text and AI to properly clean. So not when people say they're working with text, actually they're working with probably a really crummy, badly OCR'd run of text characters that would be shocking if you read them in the raw. Which is interesting. You could say on the upside that they get anything out of it is good. On the downside, why on earth would you do this to yourself? I mean, in fact, there's more effort devoted into finding new algorithms for correcting OCR errors than there is effort in making, basically just making PDFs that don't need to be OCR'd in the first place.
Oh yeah.
We've probably got to the point where carrying as it were, for want of a better term, the plain text of the document is a trivial payload. Speeds and storage space have moved on sufficiently such that small amount of characters is tiny compared to other parts of the document. So when you put that against what you lose by having to actually mine the text out of the source document. And I just juxtapose that with a comment that, you know, Randall made some while back, that if you've got the text and you've got the structure, however deep that, however sort of rich that may be, I mean, it might just be headings, it might be additional things like we've discussed here, like having, you know, structured abstracts and things. But if that's there but stored separately from the text, so if you just want to do AI type pattern search or concordance, or I don't know what the correct word is, but you want to look at word pairings and things, you want to do that sort of kind of statistical analysis, you can do that without anything creeping in that is not part of the text that you thought you were looking at. And so that's one thing I've really taken on board from our journey this year.
I would find it helpful for you to write a problem statement of that sort. I mean, it sounds like it's a problem, and that a small document,
Sure.
maybe one page or less, probably longer than one sentence, but probably less, you know, a page or less, describing it or diagramming it or whatever.
Yeah.
Would be a helpful document to have handy.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's been mulling my brain for a long time. I think the difficult thing is, it's one of these things that hit with a lot of people, hits a, no, this isn't a problem because I don't think it's not a problem. They can't explain why, but they have absolute certainty that it's not a problem.
Well, you can put it, you know, you don't have to get everybody to agree with you.
Oh, sure.
You can put it, you know, if there is, if you have a folder that says a list of important problems for text, then you can put it in there.
Right.
There.
Okay. No, I'm agreeing with you. I was reflecting just on.
If you had it to send it to me, you know, or put it on the screen instead of, you know, when you were talking about that, the screen, you know, was jumping around crazily. I had to turn my eyes away in order to listen to you during that whole time.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. But basically, yes, I'm agreeing with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I was simply reflecting on the fact. I mean, I sort of trying to, in order to you know, give good traction on that, it's partly thinking about, so what, you know, trying to think a bit more about what is it that's causing people to think it's not a problem. And I'm still in the phase of it, of sort of mining into that, because I count myself as prone as anyone to this sort of reaction.
That's another one. That's another one pager. Why is it that people respond to not only your suggestion, to many suggestions with "that's not a problem"? That's an interesting question. May not be the most important one, but it's worth a page and stuck in your folder.
No, you're right. I mean, that is true, and as I sort of said, it's something we're all prone to. So I certainly don't approach this from a sense of any sort of moral superiority on it. I think part of the thing is, it's in terms of the last thing you raised, it's because we sense I don't, you know, it's not something that would be important enough for me to worry about. So surely somebody else, this important somebody else person must have done something, because my general take on where we are with improvements means that surely this has been done. And as we all too often find out, no, it hasn't.
I think the experiment that Frode was making, asking people to say in one sentence what is important to them today, it's really interesting. I wasn't able to read any of them, but it strikes me as an interesting experiment, at least. And what I did see from not reading them is that very few people responded with one sentence. They responded with a paragraph or something resembling a paragraph. several sentences, or one. I couldn't really tell since I wasn't reading them. Maybe they were clever enough literarily to be able to make one long sentence that lasted 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 lines. I couldn't tell.
Well, they might respond, I didn't have time to write a shorter answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'd certainly like to see. I'd certainly like to see that, because I hypothesize, and you please tell me, Frode, you've read them, I guess, that they represent what I've been hoping for and finding difficult to find, is what are the key ideas in a quick way in what the whole general area that we're talking about. From my point of view, it's always, what is the future of thought and how can we improve it? But the future of text is certainly a more important element in that search and exploration.
Mm.
But I find it very difficult to. I did scroll down through the whole volume 3. I found it very hard to pick out the key ideas.
Yeah, it is hard. It is hard, and there are many. I think obviously one solution, as we've discussed, is for the author to write better. Do a better introduction, a better bolding, a better summary, and all of that good stuff. There's no question about that. But then, in terms of what we can do in terms of almost programmatically, is some kind of flexibility of views, right? Which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's one alternative.
It is interesting, actually, trying to get this abstraction. An interesting sort of unintentional experiment I've been doing. There's a large corpus of information I've written for a software tool, called Tinbox, but it's about 2,500 pages of hypertext about one tool. But it's because it's a toolbox. It's how does this bit fit with that, and all sorts of arcana of a bit of software that's lived for 20 years. And it's very interesting. I was asking people, because I probably write it for other people. So are there things that people have used it for? Are there things you find are hard to find? So you sort of know it's in there, but you forget and it's not signposted. And the one thing people, you'll either get people will say one or two things. No, it's fine. I can find everything. Or they'll say, no, I can't find stuff. But the thing is absolutely impossible to squeeze out from people is sort of the more tractable thing of, well, I was looking for this and I didn't find something. Or that, actually, yes, I do know where this is, but I realize now that if I didn't know already, I wouldn't be able to find it because it doesn't mention this, nowhere is this key concept, which speaks back to the problem of indexing and why human indexing is basically better than machine indexing. Because often the very thing being talked about is mentioned nowhere within it because of our unintentional sort of subtlety of our metaphor. It's not that we mean as a writer to hide something. And it came up in my conversation with Frode this morning that often we ourselves as the author are not unintentionally are not best placed sometimes to know what the most important, that if something we've written is of real import, other than the fact that we wrote it. It sometimes needs someone, looking at this from a slightly different context. Well, that's really interesting because that bridges, this idea to that.
Well, that's the editor's job.
Yes. I whisper that quietly. Our poor editor is present.
Well, I've edited 4 volumes of the simulations that were commercially available in the 1980s. I had in the order of 25 editors who were working with me, each from a different field, in order to make a coherent book of evaluations. And we were working on evaluations of these simulations. It took 4 volumes over 10 years to learn a few things about how to manage editor, my 25 editors. One of the things I learned, among other things, was to make to work very hard on a model that was a really good model for what we wanted. Second thing I learned was to ask them to evaluate, to actually run through the simulations and evaluate them and write them up as in a way that the model was well described and the evaluation was well described, as well as the model that we had provided. And if they did that, they would then get paid. If they did not do that, they would not get paid. And it worked.
I think you make an interesting point there, actually, on reflection, which is that when you mention, against the structure, because something I think we're prone to do in the current age is our response to that process is to actually just go do a lot of keywording, keywords, tags, call them what you will.
Yeah.
But the coupling is way too loose. So unless you have a fairly fixed taxonomy, in which case you've probably got a structure to hang it off to. You can see where my thoughts going. So basically, actually, the structure is a lot more important, because if you don't have the framework to contextualize all your tagging, now you just have another sort of soup of ambiguity that may offer something, but I think I'm more and more finding experience says actually not very much, apart from a lot of people's time and effort going to not great effect.
I mean, one of the things
I think about.
Yeah. Go on, Bob. Sorry.
No, I was going to just frame that in terms of it's what we started out with was the question of how do you gain access, and it would, if anything, if this group or some other group could provide a structure, not the perfect structure, but a structure, or maybe a couple of structures for thinking about and displaying access. And access for me is what? Table of contents, list of authors, list of titles of the papers, indexes of words and concepts, lists of key ideas. I mean, there's a whole bunch of access routes to things, and it has to do with size of document. That is, I mean, the things that the things that I edited in the 80s were 500, 600 pages long. And each one were, as I said, carefully written and evaluation of very specific items that were allowed to be evaluated. They had to be for sale. That is, they had to be commercially available. We were not doing evaluations of research projects, which would have been a different project, a different name, a different whole editorial effort. It was. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I went on a little too long there.
No, that's okay. But we all have to understand something really quite fundamental about what we are doing here, rather than other work. The act of generating key concepts is hard, first of all. And it is what the work is, right? So from, let's say from my background with art stuff, if you're doing a paper on art, some specific artwork or something in art history, you can rely on other work to back you up. And so you can say, so-and-so introduced the history of the concept of this and that, which applies or doesn't in this way. That's basically academia, the boring side of it in a nutshell. But what we're trying to do here is to look forward and invent. So of course we need to do some of that, some of us. But when you look at how pathetically little Adam, and I know he listens to all of these, how pathetically little Adam actually writes in an article, it's because it's really hard. So that's why I have to steal his words from Twitter and turn it into a pseudo article. And I'm singling him out because he is a very positive person. He is a key contributor and he really does a lot of work. But we all have different mindsets. Like Fabian will come on every few weeks and tell me I can learn to program, and someday I'll probably try to listen to him. But we do have different aptitudes. And just because someone is phenomenally good at doing a prototype or even writing about it, I also think, have mental blocks for something. I know that when I sat down to write my PhD, the hardest stuff was connecting and simplifying. It's bloody hard lifting. But when you're done with it, the page looks more basic. It doesn't look more sophisticated, right? So when Mark did that joke earlier about I didn't have enough time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one, that's clearly what's happened to a few of the people with a single sentence. And I think that's absolutely fine. In fact, some of them wrote such long responses that they are now normal articles in the book. I can't remember exactly who, but it's like, okay, this is going to have its own page. Thing is, an editor's job differ depending on the publication. My job and Mark's job, I think, is primarily to open up, to invite people who wouldn't necessarily want to write about this stuff. I think that's our primary task, and to be supportive of that. Of course, we need to do spell check and all of that stuff, which I'm awful at. But when it comes to extracting the big meanings, I try to do it in my own way, and I write it in kind of the editor's introduction and my own articles. But I'm so very, very wary of putting a patina onto someone else's work. It's a word I heard beautiful. Sorry for doing a monologue, but you have to hear this bit. There was a history of churches, the buildings, on the radio here the other day. I'm sure you can find it, Mark, if you want to. And one of the expressions used was that over time, a church has the patina of prayer basically on the walls. It's like it's stuck there, right? Which is very textual, very beautiful. The editor's tone, I'm really wary about. And when it comes to keywords, Mark found out that most of them are nonce words in academic publications, meaning they are only for that article. I make up visual meta, Peter will make up blue moon or whatever it might be. They aren't that useful. So that's why I think things like Doug Engelbart style, allowing the reader to interrogate the document, whether fixed layout or not, whatever, to go in and, now I only want to see names. Now I only want to see the defined concepts, which come a little bit close to this, but they're still rough. Now I only want to see someone who cites someone else in the book, or whatever it might be. But if we can make that snappy, and if we can allow them, hopefully in a large space, to say, oh, this bit is good, hold that here for a minute and all that. I really think interactions will help, because asking these brainy people who are working so hard to, okay, tell me in a nutshell, what did you mean? I wrote a whole article because there is no nutshell. You know what I mean? Our job is to help with that back and forth. Talking of which, unless there's, oh yeah, Mark, please go ahead. Otherwise, afterwards, I'll do the math.
Okay, I was going to sort of draw a both and thread from what Bob said about the editorial role and your comment about another aspect of editorship. And I don't see the two as antithetical. One of the issues here at the moment is that, so for instance, we've only arguably just got the full content of the book.
Still missing two. So it's pathetic, yes.
Okay, so it's still
Here we go again. Are we listening to Mark, or are we going to look at the screen?
I was only showing the screen because Peter's one sentence is in there. That's all. Just meaning to highlight that.
Well, that confused me, because I was trying to listen to Mark, and then I wasn't sure that whether Mark was putting it up there or what.
My apologies. I understand too, because I'm on two screens. So the thing, I don't have the same problems. Apologies if I missed that. So to try and put this as succinctly as I can, I think we're in a position now, as indeed arguably we've been twice before, is to take our assembled corpus and do some of the editorship of the type that Bob has discussed with the assembled corpus. I don't think it's in any way devalues the book as it exists at the moment. And if you hold to the view that we're trying to draw new thoughts, then holding the idea with a soft pair of hands is good. But what we can say is, I mean, unless the authors, which I very much doubt, complain wildly that we draw judgments on what's there, I don't think there's anything to stop us saying, well, look, we've now had, we've had a year's input on VR. What are the emergent ideas from it? I say emergent because, in other words, we're not trying to put what they've given us into a forced preemptive framework, because we don't fully know what the framework is. What we want is something that's iterative without being unending, to say, when we look across this corpus, what do we draw from it? Now these things are effectively the published article. That gets us beyond saying, oh, well, I stuck it through a keyword concordance and these words turn up more than those words. Because it's looking for the things that I always find interesting in this sort of exercise is you always get to the end and there'll be one thing that doesn't turn up in any category. And the issue that the question then is not say, oh, well, my categorization system is rubbish, is to ask a slightly deeper question. So, well, how did this not fit anything? Have we missed a complete part, or is this just a lack of fidelity? So, in other words, we need to iterate that abstraction again. And normally, whenever I've met that, it's never been, the answer has never been the one I first thought. So, i.e. the temptation is to just take something, blame it and move on. And actually, if one wants to do the extraction properly, it probably needs some more restitutive, but we do have some content now. The question, and
this is
one last thing, and then I'll just finish. One last thing, throw, and then I'll shut up. Which is that I think also that that process helps lead us towards the sort of structure that not only allows for sort of a kind of faceted browsing, you can come at the corpus from different angles, but also to us to be able to write a more, for want of a better term, structured narrative, which gets to the sort of things Bob's been talking about, some of his visual language thing. So I think all these roads converge, and now we have some content, and we can still draw in new content under the existing terms of not wanting to squash people's creativity. But now we have some content, I think we can do a more old-fashioned abstractive process.
Okay, Mark, that is part of the plan, yes. The part of the plan is once the book is done, which it should be by midweek this week, unless somebody has some emergency thing, then I absolutely want to send it to the entire community. Say, please have a look, see if there's something wrong with your own piece, but equally, if there's something else you find interesting, feel free to write a riposte or an agreement or a comment of what you've learned, absolutely. I think we have to be careful with how we word it, and we should work on that, Mark, because we most certainly do not want people to think it's more work. Because people are
sure.
really
I think, if I may, I think we're, again, not in a binary sense, but perhaps we're speaking a slight tangent there. I take what you mean entirely. So arguably today is not, the close, but fairly soon we'll be at the point where broadly the articles are done and dusted. And it will be very interesting to have comment from the wider world and audience on things. But what I was thinking is more within the caucus of those who've been pushing this project along is to work on a slightly more focused thing to try and nibble away at this sort of extraction of structure problem. Because without the structure, we don't get any of the nice faceted browsing. So I keep coming back to that term. I can't think of a better one at the moment. Person X and person Y will want to look at this through a different lens.
Has anybody tried to do that with Volume 1?
Well, the closest is David Lebeau went through in his Highliner system, which I don't have access to anymore. And he did some sort of, I'm going to use keyword term very loosely because I may be mischaracterizing what he did, but within his system, he basically said, well, this article is about this, I think it's about this theme. So he did some, you might say, some thematic analysis of what the articles were about. That I don't think has actually been seen by anyone. And that's, I don't see that in any way as a canard against him. I mean, he's done it inside his system, and probably what we need to do is to perhaps export that in some way so that it's more easily shared by more people. Because again, our object is not to critique his system or indeed his analysis, but just to say, here is some analysis.
It would be to learn from it.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I totally
To
agree.
learn from it.
Um,
What did he find? You know, was it keywords? My understanding was his highlighter could highlight a whole section, and that he went through all of volume 1. At least, now this was his. You know, I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, so or pre-COVID, I don't even remember now. But my understanding was that he was attempting to use the highlighter to enable him to pull out the items, which he was then going to organize. And it would just be his organization, but it would be I think we could learn from it.
It was unfortunate at the time too that I was one of the few. Rephrase that. I was one of the people who stepped forward and said, "I'll have a tinker with this." But what we discovered in the process is that, the way my brain's put together, I'm not a highlighter sort of person. So in other words, it was just the process didn't quite click with me. The analysis very much did. And I don't know. So David himself, I know, he went through the whole thing.
The question is, did you see the analysis?
No, I didn't. No.
Okay. So then you were not able to learn from it.
No, and perhaps now the dust has settled on the current volume. It might be a moment for maybe to drop him an email and say, look, is there any way we can sort of abstract that? I don't know how, because that's the problem. Once you do something in a tool, often getting it out in a meaningful fashion can be difficult, simply because that's not something that is yet being created for that tool.
That's a potential problem. We
don't know.
No,
indeed. And I'd be happy. I mean, for instance, I would be happy to go and spend some time just using his tool, in a sense, just to be able to read it. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Well, one of the issues that we have in this particular volume is it isn't about one thing. It is ostensibly about the future of text. But there are so many different fields. There are technical things, there's art history, there's art future. There's so many different things. I don't think it is easy in any way to make it more readable. Yes, we can try things like basic summary per piece, but I don't think we can necessarily map it out, because I think it's so multidimensional.
You could separate the articles in a rough way, understandingly that there will be overlaps and problems and all that sort of thing, which editors always have to deal with. But you could put all the technical stuff in one section. You could put some of the, I don't know, visionary kind of stuff like Andrea's stuff in another section. And I don't know what other sections, I as I said, I scanned down through the whole thing. It was very difficult to come to either access what I was looking for, or it was hard to have an organization to even go back to it.
But if we think of the articles in atomic terms, now it's in digital form. When you sort of comment, when you make the statement, we could put them in X section. That can be an effective digital affordance. We don't need to think of it, at least in terms of the run of the canonical book.
Yeah, it's a point of view.
No, absolutely. And this is where I think it's so valuable, because effectively it allows us to put multiple. It's almost like multiple portals on the thing.
Yes.
You're not necessarily saying this is this or this is better than that. You're saying that if your starting thing is you're interested in this perspective, these are the things that most immediately speak to that, and that's something we perhaps haven't done and should have a go.
I don't think.
And you have to make difficult decisions.
Okay, so
you have to make difficult decisions about putting things in different categories. You always have to.
Okay, okay. Let me just ask some questions before I comment. And what software did you use to read the book, Bob?
I don't know, whatever was given to me to click on.
Okay, does that mean you read it in Dropbox?
No.
Did you, so you downloaded it?
Yeah, but when I went back to it, I had to then, it was one of those curious download things which wasn't really downloaded onto my computer. Only the access was downloaded, and I had to wait again to go up to have it come back up through the internet.
So were you reading it in a web browser, or did you read it in a piece of software?
Yes.
Or in a different piece? Okay, so you did read it in a web browser. Yeah, I mean,
would have been probably, yes, I would have clicked on it from your email message, so
Ah,
it would have opened my Safari browser. I think that's
Right.
what it did. One doesn't have to. I hopefully don't have to pay attention to those kind of things, but I will the next time if you're knowing that you're going to ask me those kind of things.
but it's really core because you're reading it in the shittest way possible. To read it in the web browser is basically bad in terms of visual interactions and all of that stuff. So
Well,
that's
then that's a bad editorial decision, because that's the way most people expect. It's certainly the way I'm going to read things.
how would you prefer that I give you the book or publish it?
PDF.
It is a PDF.
Pop it now. I put it on my screen. I know where it is. I can click on it with one click. I don't
Right.
have to wait.
Okay,
all that sort of thing.
Okay, so Bob, there are some realities that just are. One of them is to distribute a PDF. If you want to read it in software other than a web browser, you do need to download it. When it comes to the book as it is on, excuse me, the published book, volume 1 and 2, you can go to our publishing page and you can click to download it. It's easier than via Dropbox. When we are in a community like this and it's not for general release, it is Dropbox. But in Dropbox, you can still download it, right? But there's nothing, I mean, I would like to have software that bypasses that. But the way things are now, this is intended to be read in a normal PDF reader and printed. Those are the two primary. We also want to support EPUB. I had one person email me this week, actually, last week, saying, I have problems.
Fred, I know these are important for you and for you as the editor and publisher. I'm not interested in
Yes,
that.
you are. You're very interested. Bob, you are.
says.
Bob, please. You are very interested because you are talking about issues with the book, but you haven't actually done anything to deal with how we're addressing them. When we're talking about how to read the book, if you read it in any of those media, it's not downloaded, you're going to have a bad experience no matter what we do, even if we had it organized in different categories. So when I show you something like this, where you can read the book like
you didn't give me the link that you gave me in the email. I mean, this is not it was what I clicked on. I mean, that's what I had that was handy, I clicked on.
Bob, let's not have an argument that isn't actually an argument. All I am saying is that when it comes to, this arrow key thing, I think is actually quite crucial, because when you use this software, and the arrow key is not available for general release, you can't use it yet, but when we're having these discussions on different ways for people to go through, to be able to jump around and to read the first page in testing turns out to be really useful, because the first paragraph or so, people generally say what the piece is about, right? And it's not always necessarily, a lot of them who are artists talk about the technical side. A lot of the technical people have a history piece. To do the categorization, I feel can quite quickly become taking away from the work. So to be able to just quickly go through this is one example of.
I'm just not interested. I'm just not interested in that.
Okay, well,
I'm sorry.
Okay, Bob, let me ask you. Let me ask you a really important question.
Think of me as an ordinary reader, and
I'm
now
not
you're
interested
trying
in
to sell
ordinary
me the
readers.
arrow key.
Okay, Bob.
I am an ordinary reader.
Okay,
yes,
Bob. Let me
because
ask.
I'm not going to read it anymore, because you know, I had an unpleasant experience with it.
Okay,
That's an ordinary reader's.
okay, Bob,
response.
2 questions. Number 1,
So then an editor has to say, wow, at least one data point I have is that an ordinary reader had a lot of problem with that.
no,
How am I going to help an
no,
ordinary reader?
no, not at all. That's like saying you were
That's
reading a
one
newspaper and it was
approach, it's not
raining
the
and changed
only
the
one.
weather. Bob, there are some realities in the universe. There is such a thing as the web. There's such a thing as the internet. There's such a thing as a PDF. There's such a thing as a download. These things exist. I
Now
cannot.
you're
wish
selling me. Now you're selling me.
I
You're
cannot.
selling.
Bob, I cannot wish certain things out of existence. I am not going to build a web browser for you or anyone. Okay, so when we're talking about the
I'm not
limitations-
asking for that.
Okay, but you're
I'm
saying
not asking for, you asked me what, what I found handy. I said,
I didn't ask
a
you that.
PDF. I download them all the time.
It
And
is a
they're on my
PDF.
desk.
Bob,
and
this
I
is
make
really,
them, and
Bob, it is a PDF. It's not my fault if you don't download it. And if you then complain about the reading experience because you read it in Dropbox, it isn't my fault, okay? It really isn't.
think we're
trying to
getting-
do something positive together, but it's like saying I couldn't read the newspaper because it was still in the newsstand. Take it out of the newsstand. Click download button. Don't be mad at me because I'm a bad editor for the reading experience, please.
No, I don't think. Please, I don't think that's what. Sitting listening to this, I don't think that's what we're saying. How we got into this section of the conversation was about some people their real interest may lie in a facet that is not the primary narrative of the book, which is not of itself a critique of the artifact. It's got to be in some form, and as you rightly point out, with something like PDF, there are limited choices. So I really don't think. I think it's tangential, and I don't think it's something that anyone's bent out of shape at, is how the book in a sense looks or how it's organized. It's nice. It looks nice. The issue is to a certain extent something that we'd like to do that we can't do yet because we don't have the metadata for it, and probably is hard to do. Let me finish. It's hard to do in a single PDF because unless you have a PDF reader that also has further features we don't have. But if you were the person who just wanted to read about, who I don't know, wanted to read historical issues for sake of argument, it doesn't really matter, and I don't know the content well enough to know how many articles that is. But if you wanted to do that, that might be a facet of the corpus you might want to look at,
and you
might want
the
to read
different categorizations and the different facets. And
well, then why are we going down the rabbit hole about downloading the PDF or not? Because what we were discussing was
the reason we're going down that rabbit hole is that if someone wants to try to categorize them, and it won't be me because I don't think that is actually useful, knowing the articles in the document. If we're going to make this readable for people, we have to give them interactions, which we all agree on. We need to give them useful interactions because we can't just dictate what the authors do. So when it comes to doing those interactions, it's really hard to discuss them, especially when we're trying to build systems for reading, but the people discussing it, in this case, you, Bob, you're not using that software. So you don't know what I mean. Like I go on and on about these darn arrow keys. I think it goes a huge way to solving the issue because you get a great overview of the document. But okay, Mark, what?
No, I think the arrow key. No, there are two separate things. An important distinction between them. One is, I think the idea of the arrow key as a navigation tool is nice. I like it. I think it's really useful. Does it solve as much for the general reader as you perhaps presume? I don't think so, because it doesn't. It addresses what it addresses, but it doesn't address other things. So it doesn't invalidate that. The point is that if you got, how do the arrow keys let you find the historical documents, the articles within the book that relate to history?
I would like to answer that
and
properly.
I just want to say, I don't know what the arrow key is.
Okay.
And so this whole discussion, I'm out of here. And I'm out of here anyway in a very few minutes, but for my usual out of here time.
Well,
But
this-
I don't know what the arrow key is, and
Okay.
if that's the focus of the discussion, for me it was to have where I'm at, and I'm just one reader. I'm at, oh, all right, the book is published,
How
so
many-
to,
Bob,
so to
how many-
speak, it's published.
Okay,
So you want to, so I want to look at it.
okay, all right,
I mean, and I did.
okay, very good,
That's all.
okay.
I'll send you an email, Bob, and explain what it is.
No, you don't
One
need to.
page, please.
No,
Only one
no.
page.
But in the sense that will explain the thing that you've already seen. And
Okay,
I mean,
guys.
unless you want to show it again.
Right, this is,
No, I don't.
all
I
right.
mean, unless
Bob,
if
Bob,
this is
Bob.
if this is going to be the top, if this is the top, it's always confusing to me as
Okay,
to what the
Bob,
topic
Bob.
is in this discussion,
Okay.
because I thought we were talking about access. I don't see, if we're going to talk about the arrow key is an element of access of a particular kind for a particular kind of reader, then that's a kind of discussion I can listen to and maybe make useful comment on, or as an ordinary reader to respond to. Otherwise, it just
Okay, all right,
another.
Okay, Bob, listen, please, listen, okay? I've had it with arguments like this. I really have, okay? I'd had to take a week off because of this bullshit, okay? There is so much negativity here. I will show you what the arrow key is, but first of all, a couple of specific, clear things, okay? These are just realities. Number one, we're making a book that is primarily going to be printed in PDF. Discussions on free-flowing text are really great, but not for our own book. It's secondary. That's one thing. Number two, I really do not want to categorize the articles in the book, because knowing the articles, I don't think it's useful, okay? That is what I think. Therefore, what I think is we should look at various
You're
ways.
the editor. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. You're the editor. You make the decision. I accept it.
What I really think is useful is to help people, as you say, have access to the book. I will show you now one way that we're doing that. Right. So what this is, you can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Right. So this is the normal PDF of the book. It happens to have visual meta, so the PDF reader knows where the headings are. On my keyboard,
Wait, that's not from the standpoint of the reader, though. I don't, I just see pages.
sorry, what?
I just see pages. I don't, what is it? What am I doing as a reader now?
You are looking at this in a full screen, 2-page spread.
Yeah, I am.
On top of the screen, there is forward, which is in a different font. It is the heading for this section. It's a different font from the rest of the text here, right?
Yes.
Right. So those are the headings. Those headings you can access with a keyboard shortcut like this, or you can scroll around.
Wait a minute. How do I do that?
You do Command minus to fold, and you can keep doing Command minus to see more or less. Normally, in a PDF reader, whether full screen or otherwise, if you do the right arrow key on your physical keyboard, it goes one page in, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's one of the normal interactions. When you do the keyboard to the right, the arrow on your physical keyboard to the right,
It's 5 p.m.
it will generally go to the next page.
I use the down key, the down arrow.
Right, same principle. But what I have done in this software is that you can keep doing right to go to the next page, but if you do arrow down, it goes to the next level 1 heading.
Arrow down.
It doesn't work in.
Oh, I see. So you're changing what I usually use for the arrows. Okay. Was that explained at the beginning? Because I missed it in what I looked at in volume 3.
It wasn't explained in the beginning. It is not in software that is released. I have been discussing it in various meetings over the last few weeks. So the fact that you missed that absolutely doesn't mean anything. But now you're saying what it is.
It's a beta feature.
It's just a test at the moment. So the whole idea with this test is that you still retain the ability to use your arrow keys to go page by page like this. I'm just hitting the right arrow key. But whenever you want to jump to the next section, you do the down arrow. So one of the features as you're reading something you find out it's not interesting, you skip the whole thing with the down arrow, because otherwise, if you are reading it page by page, you have to keep analyzing every page to see when the next section starts. So you can't just do it super fast, right?
Yep.
So the
So
secondary,
basically, it skips you through the top level of the index.
exactly right.
Table of contents, rather, because it's going article to article.
So the side benefit of this is it becomes a table of contents because people tend to put either an image or text on the first page. So now we can just do the down arrow to go through the whole book if we want. And we get, let's look at your article. Here we see 3 murals. We see your headings. I have to remove a line break. I'll have to fix that page, sorry. But we get a really quick impression of your article. I should probably move the space between these, right? But so
I'm just, yeah, okay, go ahead. I would have a comment on that. But go ahead.
Sure, no.
I see what you're saying. You're explaining, well, first of all, I understand now that you're explaining an experiment that you're doing with the text.
With the reading software, yeah. Sorry, 1 second, Ego just came home, yes?
Yeah, with the reading software, all right. Yes.
I can quickly fill in too that
That's a framework. Which I as a reader was not in, you understand. Where I was coming from was I was interested what's in here.
Ega, please close the door, darling. Yes. So I have written now in the book that if you use the reader software, you can do the thing with the arrow keys. You can do, the different interactions you can do. For instance, let's say you come across visual meta. You do Command F, you'll see the occurrences of visual meta in the book. That's one thing. Come across Fabian, who is he? Do Command F, and then at the top of the screen, in addition to all the occurrences of his name, at the top of the screen you get his bio. So these are the kind of interactions that we're giving readers to help them understand what this is all about, what the content is. Peter.
Okay, and how does the reader? Sorry, Peter.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it might be interesting to experiment with putting some computer source code into Author and using these modalities for exploring the software database. And of course, Mom's ready to head up and do battle with the bureaucrats at the DMV. So I'll see you guys on Friday. Enjoy the rest of your chat.
See you later, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The thought I was thinking, I mean, the other aspect, especially for Bob, what Freud was showing is sort of silently predicated. So what you're seeing there is a sort of layout proposal that it's helpful to effectively read a double page spread. That's what you're seeing when he shows full screen. And for the length of articles that historically have been, not necessarily now, I haven't been through more in detail now, but broadly, for many of the articles, so it's almost giving you a visual snapshot. So if you were to take each double spread and put them up as sort of thumbnails, it's giving, in that sense, it's giving you a visual index. And so the repurposing, as you might think of it, as a down arrow. I mean, to a certain extent, what key is related is almost a side thing. I mean, but the notion that having an expression mechanism, or even if you unmapped it on your thing, but knowing that you could traverse the document from heading to heading, I think is interesting. I still don't think it helps me understand how I find all the things on a certain topic. But I wouldn't expect at this stage a PDF really to do that, because
No, it's a good, it's a good, additional access element.
yeah, I think
That's all.
Yeah, where we have a disconnect is it's
Not a table of contents by any
No.
means, and it is really confusing to call it a table of contents. Really confusing. It makes me mad.
Well, yes, that's a long conversation I was having this morning. It's all about. I mean, the interesting thing that came out for this morning is just understanding it. Part of it is the tension between the author's intent, in this case, the editor's intent, partly as to how the reader will read things. And my moving to a more postmodernist thing said, I'm going to read it on what I read it on, because I need to or want to. So without in any way sort of being offensive to the author, I may not want to read it in the manner that they thought I should do. I might accept it as one reading mode, but it may well not be my primary consumption mode. So we, for instance, were talking about scrolling reading versus page up reading.
Yeah.
I
But
heard
this is
scrolling. I heard the S word.
Yeah. No, I was explaining a bit of our conversation that sort of surrounded this, because as Bob's just said, no, the being able to iterate through all the headings is a nice affordance.
Yeah. I think it's great. It's another way of accessing. Calling it a table of contents is really confusing to me. But as a way of going through a book, it's helpful.
And
is it the way I would go through it? Maybe. Rather than scanning each page, yeah, maybe in the second time, if it's after the first time I went through the book, I had a one that I wanted to find. I think that the down arrow would help me get to the chapter that I wanted to look at again. That's what, at least that's my first impression. I don't know if you're collecting data on this or not, asking people for their reactions to it or not, but that's my reaction to it.
Yeah, it's not intended as a table of contents, and I wouldn't refer to it as that. However, so I'm just checking a layout thing. I just had to export it again. Okay, good.
The only reason I mentioned it that way is that you just did refer to it as a table of contents.
What I meant to say is that
that was, and I excuse mistakes like that. They're easily made, but I think it's careful it's useful to be careful in that regard.
What I mean to say is that it becomes like a table of contents. Many years ago, I was working, I stole an idea from Doug without realizing it. In NLS, as I think you know, Bob, when you are typing, you type commands, and it's really kind of amazing how it's done. So I'm just exchanging drinks. Yeah. And when you get to a point where you're not sure what command is next, you can actually hit the question mark, and the system will show you at the top of the screen, at the bottom of the screen, all the possible commands, right? So without realizing it, that I had stolen his idea, I made a web version, called it Hyperwords, showed it to Doug. He was very happy, and I realized it's basically Doug's help system. Point of it is, this became a Firefox plugin. Selena Chow, probably the world's richest woman, saw it. She's now married to, anyway, let's not put too many names in here. She made her first billion when she sold Skype. Let's put it that way.
I have, I'm on. This is the time when I have to leave. I'm sorry if it's in the middle of a story, but
okay, no, it's really quick. The summary of it is, to have snapshots of something is not useful if that's what you want to look at. But anyway, we can talk about that next time. I'll bore Mark with the ending of the story. Right. So.
Gone. Okay.
Yeah. Breathe out. So. The story is kind of relevant because she asked me to build this system for the Chinese NBA, as in the American NBA, their Chinese website. She wanted me to build some kind of hyperword system. And it was very, very interesting because she wanted it to be light, not heavy on the page. Of course, I agreed with this. This was based on clicking and you get a pop-up. But what I realized very quickly was that when you were looking at something, it should be big and clear. It shouldn't be half transparent or anything like that, because it's hard to read. So it's a matter of you choosing what you see. So the idea of having kind of snapshots of the first pages, maybe on a wall, like Fabienne suggested we do. If you know the document, sure, it can help you find something again. But when you're going through it, to be able to interactively, with those stupid arrow keys, go through it, because you can easily read it without squinting or anything, that's why I'm looking at it big.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think actually what I just saw was a manifestation of.
This was really for Bob, but yeah, no, anyway.
No, I understand, and I think what perhaps was also tripping up Bob slightly is two things is that, and I remember my dad made a mistake is actually when you show something, show it at about a quarter of the speed of what you think it should be shown, because if you don't know what you're being shown, the screen changes, even on a fast connection, actually changes too fast.
Yeah, no, this is a fair point.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's something I struggle with. I get it totally wrong. But that was an aside. It's really interesting. You mentioning sort of visual indexes, because I'm now sort of rumbling through my brain somewhere in the many visual design books I've got over there, a number that actually use that. They actually literally almost have 2-up thumbnails or 1-up thumbnails as a form of visual index. It can be actually remarkably useful if it's a book that's heavier on visuals, because basically, it's the one that had a yellowish picture at the top right hand corner. Well, that's the way my mind
absolutely,
but it's useful.
So you like layout? That's interesting.
No, yes and no. The thing, you see, it's an either both. It's not a thing. It's absolutely wrong. I mean, I'll admit, for instance, I can't find the music unless I'm going by the album cover, even if it's I ended up the wrong one. But that's how I remember it. I remember it's track number 4 on this album. I never use search. Never works. I just never find stuff. Plus the fact that most of the stuff I'm searching is written in a language I can't spell in. So search, find is completely useless. So yes, it's useful as a high level navigation. I don't know. And this is the thing that, I mean, this navigation by heading. Let's leave the shortcut out of it, because I think that's another thing that confuses people. If you start with the shortcut, I think, I don't know, but I don't know many people who go shortcut purpose rather than purpose shortcut when explaining something. So
fair enough.
You get a cognitive disconnect if you start with the key, unless you're talking about something that everyone uses, or it's a known fact. And I think that's what I think had slightly confused Bob, because unfortunately, just the moment you stepped out, I said, no, I get that. That makes eminent sense as a feature. But we're also talking apples and pears. What it allows you to do is something that is useful, which is to step through a multi-article book, in the loosest sense of the word, at article level depth. And other bits that are using the same heading level, but let's just stick with the articles for a moment. So you can do that, and that's fine. I don't think I would be fibbing if I said I thought that's the only way I would want to explore the book.
No, absolutely not.
Would I use it? I'd use it as a navigational skip device.
It's not.
I wouldn't use it as an exploration thing. No. Well, but this is the chicken egg thing we've been having. I mean, I don't think anyone said that being able to move at arrow keys, it doesn't move the needle much in terms of exploration. It allows you to navigate fast, and that's good, and it allows you to navigate at a sensible scope. But I'm not sure. I think where perhaps not everyone is on the same page as to whether it moves the needle on exploration, or this aspect that it goes back to this associative thinking and search, and what I as a reader, as opposed to the person sitting next to me as a reader, is trying to pull out from the document, other than by reading it in long form sense, soup to nuts all the way through, which in fact increasingly fewer and fewer of us do. So finding content that's interesting, to use a sort of very glib phrase, is the issue. In that sense, if I'm honest, I don't think that navigational change makes significant change. It's not something it's something I'd be very happy to have. So I don't think it's at all a bad or not worthwhile feature, but I don't think it actually markedly changes the explorative aspect of the reading. It helps the navigation, which is a slightly different reading mode.
What do you mean by explorative?
So, well, I'll go back to this example, because I've got the book. I'm actually interested in reading stuff that is more, the historical aspect of what's been going on here. Maybe, things that have led up to the VR stuff we're doing, or, somebody's just written something about, I don't know, history of Paris or something. I don't know how I find that. I basically at the moment would need to probably leaf through the abstracts, if the abstracts there are. And where the conversation started out this afternoon, saying, sorry?
Hardly any abstracts.
Well, that's fine. Well, okay. So that actually shows the problem even more. So, which was the question? Then we had the short discussion of what David Abo had done with the Future Text 1, and I think then there's a misunderstanding, and I totally understand the sensitivities, in the sense that, well, if someone has said this article is about this, others may differ, but the point is, if there's nothing about what any article is, then we have nothing. If we have something, and these are not things I would expect to be in the book in the normal sense, certainly not in the printed book, possibly as metadata that, for instance, the likes of Reader could use, say visual meta in the PDF. But I made a reference earlier to something I've seen in the past, but it echoes for me now, which is faceted browsing, which it says, I want to look at this thing, but I want to look at it through this lens. I want to look at it through effectively a temporal lens, or I want to look at it in terms of relationship to VR pass-through. That's what I'm interested in. And now there may be articles that relate to how pass-through works that may not even mention pass-through or VR in them, and yet be perfectly pertinent. And this is the abstractive encoded layer that I think we were talking about earlier when Bob was here at the beginning of the conversation. These are all additive things. I don't think he was suggesting, and I certainly wasn't, this is something that this is sort of done with a cold dead hand of the editor saying it shall be this and never change. It's more about saying in the modern age, with books, at least with half a foot in the sort of digital domain, we can do more to assist. I mean, broadly, the way we would have dealt this in the past is it probably would have been effectively such a perspective keyword, you might say, could have ended up as a human indexed keyword term. And then some human indexer would have gone through, read all the stuff, and found those seemingly unconnected articles and put them in the correct associative space in the index. So another thing perhaps we're doing is looking at a way to end around the slow and expensive issue of how human indexes are so much better than machine concordances. Machine concordances are too verbose and not accurate enough in many cases. Witness the history indexing thing I showed the other week. Nothing's absolute. For the future listener, nothing's absolute. It's not that all is good and all is bad. Again, it's not totally binary, but it is certainly the case that I've not seen anyone suggesting that basically machine indexing is anywhere near as fleet of foot or as accurate as human indexing for anything other than, say, a technical document where you've already got a controlled vocabulary.
Yeah. I don't disagree with any of that.
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, and these are, I don't, and nor would I think that they would be things that about any of us should disagree. But I do think I just have to find some way to shim it into. So in a sense, I'm apart from the fact I'm holding back time to help with any genuine editorial lift and shift stuff for you. I'm trying to get my head out into another couple of projects at the moment, but I don't know. I can ask David Abo if he has his well, whatever, I'll call them keywords as a portmanteau term here, that he did for Future of Text 1, if not FOT 1 and 2, I can't recall. He definitely did FOT 1 in his highliner, I can't remember, highliner, I think it is, software. I don't know how easily it is abstracted. It may well be that, for instance, when you take the data out of the tool within which it was constructed, it may have far less use. I don't know. The answer is to try. But it would be interesting, for instance, just to take that and see how it looks, but deliberately not, absolutely emphatically not saying this is person X's take on this. What we're really trying to say is, if I'm given this and I map it, can I see the mapping? So, because I don't, it's to try and de-interleave two things. We can get, we tend to end up in a difficult mix where it's person A's highlighting versus person B's, whereupon personalities and views intrude. It's perfectly valid, but I think it's a separate academic or intellectual exercise from just saying, here is some information that has been encoded about this corpus. Can a fresh pair of eyes take that and see that reflected in this?
Yeah. So
we haven't done it at any stage, I don't think, but we could do.
Yeah. So a couple of things on that. If you want to do that, I think that would be very useful. I think we would have to find a way to put that into the book. I think we could do that. Also, first of all, a small comment. I have now made it clearer, the instructions here, for those who choose to read it in this way. It's kind of like on that page. And oh, fuck. Hang on, that means I don't think. Okay, I'm just going to re-export. But the point is, we can do that while that's happening. So we have, I know you know this, but it's just so I can talk about it while looking at it.
Yeah, sure.
This stuff at the top of the screen is, of course, the glossary, defined concepts.
Yep.
I'm changing it here. It's not going to say defined concepts. It'll say glossary of defined concepts. So it matches better.
Yep.
So I think what would be maybe more useful is if you were to go through the glossary as it is now, because it's far from perfect, and click about, because this is really also a way for people to go through the text. Because remember, we are in charge of deciding what the glossary is. The glossary looks, it's too much. I mean, look at this, right? I just added Charlie today because he added a little piece. But if we go through and make sure that everything has, okay, just for the sake of argument, that's all I have from him, and that's fine. Now,
okay, right? Just out of interest, if I open that thing you just showed me, you showed me that map. If I open that document on a 28.7-inch screen, I presumably will actually see, ironically, we'll see more of the map. Would be my hunch.
Are you one of those bastards who have such a screen?
No, actually, I don't. But my wife's iMac is behind me, and that has a 27-inch screen. The only reason I'm mentioning that, I was thinking, so if I was thinking the conversation we were having this morning, and I'm not, this isn't some going down I don't have a fixed view in this. I was just sort of interested. So yes, I can go, absolutely, I can go and take a look at the glossary and see what's sort of there and what isn't. I'm just I sort of rattling around the back of my brain. So our opening conversation, the open to our conversation earlier today, not the one this recording, but a previous one, and we were talking about author's map and some of the challenges map spaces pose for us in terms of data display and data, data density and things. Out of interest, is it the expectation in the PDF that all URLs are clickable?
Yes, but there may be a rendering error every once in a while, and there may
Yeah, no, that's fine. I totally get that. No, I do know that. But sorry, that wasn't an oblique. This wasn't me leading up to this doesn't work. What I mean is, if I see one, aside from the fact of getting a broken one, but because this is one of the things I was thinking about when I wrote my article, is that there is a problem when you're writing for mixed medium, actually, and you actually want to communicate, because the URL needs to be readable on a paper page, because otherwise you can't type it out into a browser.
That's why I have to
and
put them
ideally,
all,
it's clickable.
unless they're short,
Yeah,
put them
yeah.
in endnotes.
No, indeed, that's what I did. In fact, what I did was I made a URL to anchor text in the article, then I put an endnote, and the endnote has that, and in some cases, an explanation as to why you might want to have clicked on that thing. It's probably an elaboration. I wouldn't necessarily expect people to do it, nor would I judge people for not doing it, because unless you've been asked to do it, why would you think to bother? Because it's probably the editor's job to do that.
Yeah, well, I've gotten so many articles from people like Dini who really know what they're doing, but they live in a much more academic world where they have all of it written at the end, and of course, an author, it's different. But clearly, that's not their fault, obviously, to just repeat that. So that's an example where we do.
So have you, in that instance, well, if someone's basically put you, say, I mean, actually if they've put references in, there's no harm, because in fact that's useful. It's there on screen and it's usable to person. And so the only bit you might want to tinker with is making some of the links clickable if they aren't, or providing an endnote in order to make that possible.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I presume that, I mean, I didn't put any, as it happens in my article, I didn't put any references because I wasn't making anything that I would regard as formal citational references. There were a number of things that I thought needed at least a Wikipedia link, that if you didn't know what, I don't know, SVG stood for, you might want to go and read up on it. Yes. Because, we're a mixed ability class and you don't know what people don't know. As opposed to saying, blogs in their paper of such and such. And in the general thing that I was writing on that just would have been, I think, a bit grandiose, because none of the things in that case, none of the things in the discussion were things that I would imagine anyone would find needed citation. I see someone's joined us.
What? People?
If we keep talking for long enough.
Oh my God. Hi, Brandel.
Bob's been and gone, and Peter had to go and take his mum to the DMV.
Understandable. Sorry, Heather broke her arm this weekend, so we were just talking about what to do.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
What happened? How did she?
Yeah, she at a roller skating rink.
Oh.
So I sort of understandable, but yeah, no less inconvenient or painful actually at times. But yeah,
not at all. Hang on, I just screwed this up royally.
Yeah, roller rinks, the kind of things we're allowed to do for health and safety. Yeah.
Yeah, well, for good reason. Yes. I was talking to an orthopedic surgeon about the sort of uncomfortable convenience of pogo sticks and the steady stream of work they produce for him.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm encouraging Edgar to learn skateboarding, so I can't really talk. He has his two-wheel scooter, which is he's staring. Remember, Brandel, when we walked on the Thames, so we saw the skateboarding area. He loves staring at them. So,
oh, that's lovely. Well, I mean, if you get a certain amount of experience in, I suspect, before you're over a certain threshold height, then I imagine that the dangers are significantly reduced. I've heard somebody, I think my sister, who is a doctor, said that one prominent, plausible reason for the reason why human height is where it is and no higher is because it's the highest that a human head can be before the risk of falling to the ground becomes sort of existentially imperiling for the entire species. So get it in while you're short,
That's a really good
In
point.
the olden days, all archers were a certain height. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, so we had an in-depth, huge, massive fight with Bob. I did, which was actually very interesting. And it happened. It's just like after a week of trying to breathe and then coming back to that wasn't very useful. But it turned out that we had a couple of missed assumptions. One of them was that, of course, we're going to optimize the book for various medium. We'll probably also have an EPUB version of it. Of course, that is absolutely what we're working on, but primarily I am trying to optimize it for PDF in Reader because it's an experimental platform I fully control. So it turned out that we talked through things and mentioned the arrow keys things. You had no idea what I meant by arrow keys, which is fair enough. But earlier also, it turned out that he generally tends to read the PDFs in the browser by accident if they aren't downloaded. So reading in Dropbox is not exactly an augmented experience. So that became a bit of a teaching moment for all of us to make sure we do things.
Actually, I think one reason I know I've heard people say, well, I read it in, whether it's in Chrome or Safari or whatever, is that I haven't yet decided this enormous PDF is worth downloading yet. So a real low risk way is to skim read it in the browser. And I'm amazed the number of people who don't know about, certainly in Safari, if you move you move your cursor, should I say, onto the screen, you see a little float over with a download link. I remember meeting someone the other day who'd used Macs for years that didn't know about that and would use file save or something. So the assumptions you can make, I find over time become more limited.
Yeah.
So what were the two different ways of doing it, Mark?
Well, it's if you click on a link to a PDF, your browser used to download it because it didn't know what to do with it. These days, unless it's been set as a download link. So for instance, if you set a Dropbox share link, if you just alter the 0 to a 1, it actually does a forced download, for instance. So when I send Dropbox links to people, that's what I do. They don't get an option, they get a download. For just this sort of reason, actually. But it is the case, and I've seen people, even some of my erstwhile fellow students, would be, I remember asking someone, do you read that in the browser? And they said, well, yeah, because it might be really shit, and I'm not going to, sorry, I shouldn't say that on public, but it's really rubbish, and I'm not going to download it. So in other words, I have skimmed through first, and only when I've decided it's worthy of my time and interest, do I click the download button, which led me to also discover that some people don't use the little float over panel that you get in Safari, and probably in the other browsers, but I don't use them as much, where it says, oh, do you want to print this? Do you want to download it? You just press a little button. And you don't
the option context menu, you mean?
No, literally, if you've got a PDF on screen in Safari and you put your mouse over it towards just about dock height again up from the bottom, you'll see a little panel with about 4 buttons in it, one of which is a download icon.
Okay.
And that just saves...
Interesting. I'm actually not familiar enough with Safari to be. I really want to see this.
Okay, let me just quickly share a screen. Do you mind, Fred?
No.
And I'll
there. I see. Yeah. I see.
you got
I see the one.
Okay. Yeah.
It's on a white PDF. It's got 4 buttons.
Little gray.
Zoom in, zoom out, and then it's got a. Yeah.
Which often, once you've found it, is quicker then, because sometimes when you put it in the save thing, it then wants to apply all sorts of extra cleverness or put it in a place you didn't want, whereas this basically just rams it into downloads, and it's simple. But again, it just shows how assumptions based on more than a trivial amount of personal use put you in a perspective space on these things That can very rapidly. So what it would be different to somebody else, and this is what was happening with Bob. He said, well, you know, you sent me an email link, I clicked on the email, and then he described opening it in his browser, which in his case is Safari, and reading the document. Now, clearly that has none of the extra special sauce that's built into Reader, for sake of argument.
Yeah, those don't have any tooltips at all either.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to some people about that.
Oh, talking of which, talking to some people about stuff. Hang on, I'm going to show you something. Two different things. I would very much like to, hang on, I'm just trying to save a file here. My computer's going nuts. Let me just do that so I can give you my full undivided.
And also, I'll suggest you ask some of the questions you asked me this morning about the map and scaling and font scaling, because I think Brandon probably would have some useful insight, you know, well, a view on it, put it that way.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure, Mark, if you saw, I took.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Great.
Courtesy of Frank, I these days I don't read Twitter in a browser, and unfortunately my one of the things Twitter did a while back was cut off all the nice extra affordances like these message chats from third-party things. So you can either have all the ads and all the crap, or you can have a reduced experience. And I've rather sort of trotted off. But fun enough, just this very morning I did see that. So yes, and thank you for posting that.
Yeah, I'm going to get it so that they're paginated to a certain document height. I don't know if there are clues in the HTML of the PDF as to where the original pagination breaks were. But nevertheless, it should be possible to get it so that there's a reasonable quantity of paragraphs appropriate to approximately a page height. But yeah, so it was, yeah, it's not, it's sort of written more or less like as you would expect as an RTF. And so that I had to put chapter breaks, but they're pretty self-explanatory in terms of putting them after the putting them immediately before the chapter header tag type, and so that's pretty straightforward as a mechanism. And so if there's a desire to do that for any other purpose as well, then it's a good hint for anything coming out of it. Is that a P class S7 is appropriate to use as a sort of a section or chapter break.
No, that's really interesting, because we had I had a conversation with alluding to some author design stuff with Fred this morning, and actually just riffing on this fact that, you know, I do increasingly find myself wondering what the point of RTFD or RTF as a format is in the current day and age. Ironically, actually, RTFD, well, I should have remembered this. RTFD actually is a folder document.
Yeah.
So it's actually RTF with presumably insertion markers hidden in the binary stream for where the images go.
Yes. Yeah.
But I'm coming to the sort of sense of what is the point today in sort of 2022 of RTF, because what current problems it's solving. We don't have quite the size constraints. We're not worried about sending everything necessarily packaged, squeezed down into one tiny BAV file. And if we basically bake the structure / style into the text stream,
yeah,
along with all the structural textual elements like the headings and the page numbers and all that sort of thing, then to do anything tractable with the text, we've got to unpick all that work. Whereas if we were storing it in a semantically structured, effectively HTML or STL, you know, something that sort of type
equivalent,
of thing, we would have so much such quicker access, because it comes back to this thing that, you know, for automated readers, if you want to get all the magic of all the clever stuff machines can now do, you really don't want the chapter number, or you don't want the page number, or the you know, running footnote, or the copyright statement, or all that other stuff that's otherwise just glommed in there.
Yeah, well, I think it's largely like object orientation and sort of the rising wave of that within computer programming is that the reality is that it was always possible to write in OO, and some languages make it obligatory to at least pay lip service to it. But it's also entirely possible, as anybody who's studied with other undergraduates in computer science, to see how fantastically half-assed people can be with their implementation of OO. So, you know, in Java or C# or any of those languages, you can just munge the language so it's back to imperative, or you can go purely functional in the way that people who write what's the Haskell, you know, if you absolutely must. So the sort of the innovations of the languages are not so much that they are OO, or that it's that they sort of encourage you and you're going to meet less resistance that way. I think in that same way, but you know, beyond that, like you could have written any way, any time. I think the same thing with RTF is that RTF is opinionated about being for a stream to be presented in one way. And so you can make HTML functions like RTF in terms of having individual atomic sort of tags, no nesting, no hierarchy, and you could have done that anytime, but the sort of the importance of it wasn't necessarily clear at the time that people were building that. Like it's something that only comes to the fore once the idea of a responsive view of a web experience, or a responsive view of an experience, such that especially the mobile web even, like prior to the mobile web, everybody would say, you know, there's an optimal resolution to view this website at, and if you aren't doing that, then you have something wrong with your system that you know you should be chided for. But you know, the mobile web started to mean, well, actually there are a range of valid things, and I can only see that as continuing in the future.
Yeah, no, in fairness, as I appear to speak, you know, for past choices. I mean, I totally understand that, you know, rather as with PDF, you know, at one point it was a marvel you could just print anything out or make it look consistent. We sort of forget that, and it's not that long ago. But in the same way that things move fast, I'm not sure that those constraints really bind us anymore, or not in a way that the retaining those constraints are to our benefit.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to ask you some questions, Brandel, if you don't mind.
Shoot.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bear in mind that there are some things that I probably can't talk about.
Oh, no. I'm not interested in knowledge coming to me. Why would I want to learn anything? I know.
Okay.
According to some people on this chat, every once in a while. But yeah, so hang on, I'm just going to share screen as well. I'm just trying to clean up a version of this. So the thing is, I'm a developer, I'm tiny, at least I have good reviews of my software, but I am a real developer. When it comes to VR, the thing we've discussed before, just to go through it again, hang on, this is almost saved, so I can, boom. So yeah, we'll look at that in a second, because it's our book that we're doing together, and I've seen your videos, which are now in the book, but that's a whole big story. The notion of an application easily being able to spawn a window into a VR view, as Fabian puts it, can happen. But the thing that is different between what Fabian and what I was talking about is Fabian is talking about in this Linux system with these layers of expensive amazingness, you can do it. What I'm saying is that as a poor, small individual, if Apple developed an API where I could tell my programmers, go and do this, so that I can have, if you look at the screen now, you see I have headings, as you know, as a JSON, I have defined concepts. If I could, just as the most basic thing, say, on the left, I will have this, and the app that I will build will allow eye tracking, so it can fade away or not. That's the first thing, this you know. The second half is maybe more important. And it is the monitor I'm sitting in front of now. It's a MacBook Pro 13-inch. It's a wonderful piece of kit. But when I put my headset on, and I've been playing with Immersed and all of that a lot, what I really need, and I think most people would also want, is to be able to not have the same display mirrored in VR or AR. Forget VR, I mean AR. But to be able to, as we've kind of discussed earlier, either with clicking and dragging, but even with my hands, to be able to make it a portrait scale. So what I'm selling you on the idea is that you talk to the guys doing the stuff and say, if a developer can choose to have even their main screen be represented with different attributes in augmented reality, that will be so useful if it's easy for us.
Yeah. I feel like my first reaction to that is that it sounds like what you're talking about is an external monitor, one that happens to be sort of facilitated through a VR display, in this case the Quest Pro. And so to that end, it would be my expectation that the display should be able to tell the operating system, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily the case, but in terms of the actual division of responsibility within the API at the API level, it would be my expectation that it should be possible for the display to announce to the OS, here are my supported modes, and so it would be my expectation, although not necessarily the case, that they could be arbitrary, and so you could have because I've got this BenQ monitor next to me, BenQ, I guess, and it can go portrait and landscape. I can turn it, and macOS is able to pick it up, and it's quite a glorious experience actually, because you get this big long weird thing. And so the people who built the monitor have managed to successfully supply whatever credential information to macOS, hopefully through maybe a VESA standard or something, that allows it to say these are the supported monitor modes. I don't know if that list, it would make sense for that list to be statically populated in the context of a monitor that has a static set of capabilities. So it may not be the case that that a monitor, in the current implementation of macOS, has the ability to kind of adapt to something that has the ability to kind of accommodate arbitrary dimensions, but it should at least be able to take a portrait and a landscape if those things are set up properly. Like I said, I've never written things. That's not where I live in terms of the stack. So I'm not familiar with what is actually permissible, whether there are, sometimes there are licensing issues. HDMI famously sort of said that they would have internet connected things where the HDMI sort of license could be potentially revoked if it was found to be doing too much pirating. So I don't know what the ins and outs of how a display device reports and registers its resolution. It seems like a really good idea, and it seems like in a world where more displays become available through that, I would see no significant reason why OS vendors, Microsoft and Apple, would object to augmenting and extending that API to be more accommodating of those things. I can check with folks, but yeah,
it would be so nice. I mean, I can imagine, coming from an advertising background, as you share, a demo where Tim Cook has the headset, puts it on, and the first thing he does, he sits down and, we've all seen a mirrored display. Okay, whatever. So it's great quality. Then he takes his hand and turns it portrait. And then everything else happens, whatever it is. But just that ability, then even the 11-inch MacBook M2, 3, whatever it's going to be, is going to be. Anyway, so I just want to drop that in your ear. You don't have to comment further. I'm glad you like the general concept.
I think it's valid in a general context where we have the notion that more arbitrary display devices are coming. As I've shown flashed around my projector, I think that projections are really interesting. There's a Samsung projector coming out soonish, or it's already, maybe it's not. It's a Xiaomi, I think, as like 170 pounds for like a 200 anti-lumen projector, which is, you know, not amazing, but a lot better for dollar than it has been in the past. And so yeah, and what that is, I think, needs to be sort of modulated a little bit more than the sort of the concrete rendering that we have of what a monitor is, because you can have it as wildly different sizes. And so you could potentially have it as a small monitor with a high pixel density or a large monitor with a low pixel density. And functionally, those are meaningfully different. It's something like, I used to talk to the Safari folks about what, so in web, we have something called device pixel ratio. Old monitors were DPR1, and newer monitors report as DPR2. I think iPhone 10 and up started to report as DPR 2.5. And one of the things that I said to them is, if we ever put browser on TV, I would like to have it as DPR5, so that it was a relatively low number of sort of CSS pixels, because the readability of things when you're 10 feet away is, you know, somewhat impaired. But what I would love is for those things to be just icy crisp in terms of the outlines. And so having a device pixel ratio of 5 for a comparatively low resolution would be, it struck me that this is sort of the best approach to that. Haven't heard from that. There's been no movement that I'm aware of on TV, but yeah, I think that sort of the general concept of like how we control people's understanding of what a monitor is sort of perceptually for versus its technical capabilities is something that will need to be paired apart in the future as we get a greater flexibility for how we sort of manage and media display, if that makes sense.
I think linked to that is another interesting thing, conscious of the way we sit on the cusp where we're moving from effectively physical, you know, one or more monitors, physical interaction to potentially a fully VR or AR, it doesn't really matter which, is the ability effectively for the app, rather than the environment, say, okay, you know, when I'm in this app in AR, you know, quite apart from, you know, the thing Frozen to turn of a particular monitor said, but then also there will be two other, you know, effectively you describe it there. You might ask why? Well, because probably for the user, that's actually sort of where they can conceptualize it. And it's always at this stage, it's going to be easier to do when you're not wearing a headset. Maybe not in 4 years' time, but now you can say, okay, right. So I can imagine in my mind's eye, I want an extra monitor here, and I want a photo gallery up there, or something. You know, simplistic terms. But what that also, so that would, I think, chime with what you talk to in API terms. So in other words, the app can talk to the environment, which in an AR VR sense may be, if it's a single app running, well then arguably it is the environment. But nonetheless, it's the sense that the app can say, well, this is what I want myself to be when I'm instantiated.
I have a big question now. I just realized looking at this page. Let me just render this page here. This is also an important issue because your remit, Brendel, is within WebXR, right?
Within web.
Within web, yeah. So have you had you just woke up, but I just posted a video here. Hang on. Because you guys did these cool experiments on reading, and me screaming, can I have an article, which I just did, right? It's in here. So a couple of things on this. Number one is I added, before anybody reads the book, this is how you can read it as an augmented PDF if you want to, but so many people don't know, so I made it really screamingly clear. So that's fine. Also now, the arrow key thing we've talked about now works. So down goes to the next, what's going on here? I've broken it. I've broken the
next heading.
I've broken the export. Hang on. That usually means we
I'm no stranger to that.
Exactly, but so okay. That's fun. It works. I'm happy. Blah blah blah. But there is this thing about reading. So we have this. This is liquid. So what it did was I felt this block of text was a bit heavy. So I do invoke liquid, do a keyboard shortcut, and it does this flow break and comment. You know, it's I can't remember. There's somebody has done research on it, it turns out. So it's not like my unique contribution or anything, but it breaks on comma and or, double break on period. So if it's heavy text, this becomes easy to read, right? How amazing would it be?
I would be fascinated to the name of that. It's very similar to visual syntactic text formatting, but that also breaks on all conjunctions. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. That's much more sophisticated, and it does indents and all kinds of beautiful things. Yes, thank you. That is exactly what I was talking about. So I'm just wondering if it would be really interesting to have an API as well, that you have a normal document in an XR situation and you do a thing like this. But what happens now is this floats in front of the previous. So there is a knowledge, because what I'm trying to do,
like a lens.
yeah, like a lens. But what I'm trying to do is acknowledge the fact that I'm a really poor developer, right? So and I think the magic of APIs from an OS is amazing. So if it could somehow be told this is now floating text, that could be kind of fun. Let's find your piece.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. The floating in the sense of being sort of conceptually on top. You mean like using a frosted glass effect to be able to kind of separate and Z and.
No, I'm thinking about,
you know, like Apple has that as in Swift UI.
I'm thinking about in a VR, AR environment, you're reading a document and you literally lift it off the page because you need to focus really on that, you know. So it's between worlds, because obviously at some point, at many points of reading, you do want a solid background. It's a lot easier to read. But what is it to lift?
Well, so I mean, WebXR unfortunately doesn't have any APIs for text at all. Like WebXR has, well, that's not entirely true. WebXR has the ability to submit something as a DOM layer in some sense, but I don't really understand how it works, and Meta is the only people with an implementation of it, so I don't know that it counts. I haven't followed their intention with it. It doesn't make sense to me yet. Maybe I need to talk to the chair who gets back to work this week. So, yeah. So in web, you know, that's not up to Apple. In Apple, that's not something I can really make any comment on.
No, of course not. That was just since we were going through those things.
Yeah.
But there's something we talked about, Mark and I, earlier today regarding the map. Do you have a few minutes on that? Okay, wonderful.
Sure.
Just checking your face if you did. Okay, cool. Because currently we do have the map and it's a mess because we've tried to implement some new things. So this is our test version. Selected when they shouldn't be, and we have a contradiction. We have now tags to show and hide, but we also have this hide selected item. So we're really struggling with absolute rubbish, and that's entirely my fault. So I put together this presentation for Jacob. It should be obvious, but maybe you have an insight, market several that changes it. That's the problem statement, which you know. So what we're going to do in the new one is in author, we list all the tags. You can only toggle between hiding and showing a specific tag. But also as an authoring tool, you can choose to hide everything with a tag or without a tag. So you can remind yourself where you may not have tagged. When you go to the edit tag, you get this little floaty dialog on top there. It comes with 5 predefined tags, which you can edit or delete. And it comes with a few of them have a little bit of formatting.
6 p.m.
The person is italic because it looks like a signature. The location is bold because it's big. And the institution is big and bold because it's humans in a big place. I have played for hours with all kinds of further, and it gets crazy and useless. So this is arbitrary, and as you can see, anybody can edit this. Now, just looking at this, with the key idea being that these concepts are always in your application. It's not per document, it's for the application. So after a while, you can get used to command 1 is the concept, command 2 is persons. You can hide or show only persons, all of that stuff, right? Do you have any comments on the list, on the amount, or anything else?
No, I mean, those look okay. Something that I would say is not unreasonable is some kind of icon accompanying those things. Like a lot of the time, in the same way that somebody might have like an email address, like it's completely not unreasonable, I think, to have a little mail icon, a little letter icon next to them. And if you want to have an institution, to have a building or something. So those things I find very readable, and so the ability to prefix one of those things with some kind of icon from a limited set wouldn't be, I think, awful. Without spending more time personally, which I can and I will, thinking about the function, what specific uses I would intend myself and other people to get out of the map view. I don't have anything more high level than that, but I do think that those would be reasonable, because yeah, like I was thinking about the ability to have sort of the view of, person, concept, institution, as the sort of the toggle views visible in the same way that, for example, Blender tells you whether you're in vertex, edge, or face mode in the edit mode and things like that. So I think that those would be possible, but it's the Swiss Army knife problem of how are you overburdening the system by collecting this functionality and that functionality and that functionality, and what is the appropriate mechanism for deciding that selection conceptually at the high level of, like, as an application provider, what are you going to do versus the in the immediate moment, what is configurable about the application, because for example, Microsoft Word, maybe they've backed away from it, but there was a time when they really gave you the kitchen sink, and as does Blender. But then they have these sort of configurable views, which can be entirely configurable. Most people don't and shouldn't. So yeah, it depends on whether you want to provide somebody a toolkit on which to be able to build those views, and then a couple of really good ones, or if you want to do less better, which is people don't love it when I say that that's what Apple does at Apple, but it is what we do. As we take functionality away until what's left makes sense, and we can work on it so that it looks real great.
I think that's very important.
I'd cross about that lack of tooltips.
No, I think that is really an important principle. And as I even talked to Emily in the car today, I said, anybody can invent any piece of software if you provide one single button to do one single thing. That's that's not that hard. The problem is to make it something your fingers can actually deal with, right? So instead of so yeah, the reduction of functionality is definitely not a bad thing.
I don't know, does the OS provide sort of, well, not so much monochrome, but grayscale icons? This is something I sort of, in terms of using maps, sorry, again to make a tinderbox, but I used to spend a lot of time in knowledge maps and that. One of the things that cropped up there is you can effectively do just what you said, is it applies a little badge to it. And people started using emoji type badges, but you suddenly get the John Bull printing effect. You get too much salience from the color. So actually what you need is something that's sort of not so much black and white, but gray and white, or whatever is suitable in contrast terms for a dark background. Because anything more, basically your eye keeps bouncing onto the most obvious thing, which is the icon, which is not what you were describing at all. you know, so the icon is supposed to be the adjunct to the text, not the text to be the label to the icon. And that, going back to this point of doing less but better, I think it's exactly in that narrow thing. The annoying part there is you can't just necessarily reach for, you know, default set of emoji or something as labels, which would seem the obvious place to start. But I think that would pay you well in the long term, simply because you get color, especially as you're not using color in this in any other form for reasons I know we've discussed, which I
Absolutely. So I have not gone through so we have a private, hopefully it's not, you know, scary to say, we have a private version of SF symbols internal to Apple that we don't release. I mean, you see it all, but you don't get to use it all. But SF symbols is the font set that sort of is supposed to be as Apple-y as possible. I believe, so this page is the overview. I believe it should have a good number of things. Google provides another thing similar to this, but it's googly rather than Apple-y. Was it Google on launch?
Because it's interesting, yes. One of the Mac keyboard symbols you can't get in black and white is the function globe symbol at the moment. Because the best you get is a colored globe. All the other ones you can do in, I think they're all in Lucida. It's about the only place where the Apple publicly you can easily get the Apple keyboard shape. So if you're wanting to give the classic, you know, command press this, and then the actual sort of keyboard shape analog sort of thing, like the at interest sign for the Apple logo.
Yeah.
March of progress, that's all it is. We didn't have the function key until quite recently, or the globe symbol rather. Yeah. It's the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed into the font set. Yeah, so that's hilarious. It might not be cropped. It might just be that it goes above the ascender height.
But nothing else does in this, so it's a worry. Oops, that's not what I wanted to cancel. So by
What's
the
that
way,
Arabic script? There's a really awesome, like, house of something is the name of the symbol, and it's a couple of concentric geometric shapes. Anyway, I imagine that's also pretty big.
I just wanted to show you this, Brandel, because it works now. I had made a mistake. So just so we've gone through it. This is our entirely unreadable table of contents. Here's the legal, the introduction, how to use the book. So right arrow key goes through page by page, down goes to next top level heading. I find it so useful because here it tells me what things are about, and you hold down, you quickly go to where you want to get to. And we got these single sentences. I know you can't really write anything proper, but if you want to have a single sentence thing saying VR is great or whatever platitude or not you want, it may be appropriate.
Thank you. No, I was vanity searching through the text and found that there were 113 instances of my name, so I feel like I'm reasonably represented.
All polite, I hope.
Most of them, many of them are my own interjections. So I'm not completely absent from the record.
No, you're up here. You're all over the place. Lots of Q&As, but and also we have a long bio on you in the glossary. But so you asked about the use case and removing functionality earlier. That's what Apple does, and I do agree. Now the map has two functions. One, it is to show of us as a community doing something slightly different with text, obviously traditional, not VR. But the commercial reason, so to speak, is to help a student learn and communicate a thing. So the map is to help them define as they learn and then see how things connect. When they export to their PDF to hand it in, the glossary, as you know, is what the defined concepts become, but this is what's so nice, the way that they are related. You know, so if you read, oh yeah, also now, this is kind of nice for the new exports. I have a new team working. Oh, look at these beautiful people, by the way. The glossary is now much more readable. We've removed some formatting that just wasn't necessary.
Good. No, that looks really nice.
Germany. Germany is a location. Oh, really?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing I tripped over, and I know it's one of these things where I'm sure it's absolutely no win at the sort of developer level, which is that is the way in which line breaks. It's whether you use line breaks and double line breaks as paragraph markers or single line breaks, because the render. So, for instance, you get a single line break will give you a paragraph distance in author, but it won't in an endnote. So if you put double spaces in your endnotes, when you export it, you end up with double, because the LaTeX exporter or whatever engine is being used. I'm not sure there's an easy way around that, but I guess it's unless the text input box that you use for typing endnotes is using the same layout presumptions as the main text space, that problem will always occur.
Yeah. Well, it's a very big problem as it transpires to be able to control a text cursor that is able to be adequately responsive to the nesting environment.
Yeah.
Ken Koscienda, who now works at Humane, but started the WebKit and was one of the sort of the forming members of the iPhone team, has a great piece, and I think it's either in his book or it's in his Computer History Museum oral history, where he talks about the fact that he didn't do a great job of it, but he did for many, many years the least worst job of text input on iPhone and being able to take a text cursor left or right through rich text. And so, you know, Mail to this day is still using a WebKit view for that very reason, that being able to figure out where you are and what pieces are in which formatting. And honestly, I don't think Notes. I think Notes gets it wrong as frequently as it gets it right for me, because the modality is inadequately represented by the little blinking cursor. So it's a hard problem.
Sure, that's why I skated past. I hope I didn't make it sound like this is all rubbish. I mean, I'm absolutely sure that a reason it's like this is not as easy as, you know, it's easy to say at the end, oh, that's wrong. You know, this is too much or this is not enough. But that's the easy part. stating that you don't like something, but the reason it's come to be that way, I understand, is more subtle.
Yeah, it wasn't apologia for it. It's more that it's interesting. I think that one of the missing factors is that there's an inadequate level of detail to the intentionality of a left and right arrow, which could in the future, in a more immersive context, be supplemented and augmented by various aspects, like, for example, the speed of the motion or the size of the motion. You know, I think that there were some really wonderful things at WIST back possibly last millennium around hysteresis of being able to kind of identify selection granularity based on the precision of stuff. So if you click in the vicinity of a piece of, like, if you click quickly and sort of coarsely, then it will automatically and immediately take it up as selecting a fairly coarse-grained set of things. Sure. Whereas if you move it really carefully onto the ascender of a D, then it'll know that you really mean something precise without having to kind of fiddle anything. But in that same sense, we might be able to do that movement.
I was thinking, you know, the thing that caught my eye was this fact. It's the difference between, so if I see a text box that isn't in sort of monospace font, I reckon that probably a line break is a paragraph break. If it's a monospace font, I know all bets are off. I'm now in sort of Cody world, and you know, it is what it is. So we have blank lines. But so the issue, for instance, at the moment when I was exporting my article, I was trying to make the PDF look nice, and so I was having to put line breaks in the glossary items, which is just a text input box that was different to the way I was using in the main body article. And that's obviously because whatever the framework part underneath is thinking of the text in a different way. But it's exactly the same as you're sort of mentioning, because it's a no foul thing. It's not obvious that they're different, that they would treat something like, because, you know, if you're just typing in a small input box, why would you care about sort of nice line breaks?
Exactly.
It depends where you send the text next.
They're beginning to scream a bit loudly from the kitchen. But good.
I see.
Brandla, it was really
Yeah.
nice to see
Thanks for sticking around.
your deep reading thing was really cool. Is that something we
Yeah.
can play with as well?
Yes. I think one of the things I will try to do is build it so that it gives you something more related to the quantity of lines rather than a single semantic block below that top level of a section, so that I can bundle at least some kind of, because more often than not, it's a single word or a single heading, and I think that's not phenomenally helpful. So
No,
I think I'll either make it be sort of configurable or something so that we can do that. But yes, I'll put it up. It's actually up online. I just
Okay.
I'll put some options on it.
Because what Adam also worked with, this whole thing of holding something in your hand and reading, sounds interesting, but I can't know until I try it. So I'm going to bug him for the same thing.
Of course.
And also, I mean, like immersed, I want to work more, but it keeps having my hands be magic. I don't want lasers when I'm typing. So it's these weird quality of life things. And I feel that the idea of reading something so simple as what you have, because as a demo, it looks stupid. Obviously, because it is your mind choosing what to read. So for the user, it's something else. So I really find that very compelling. And if you want me to mark up the text differently to help you, you know, not have nonsense on the screen, you know, obviously we can do that soon when the book is done.
Yeah, no, it wasn't exceptionally onerous to format it so that I found the section, the chapters and things like that. I don't know that your current internal representation is particularly amenable to giving me something better right now.
Okay.
But I'll think about it. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Look forward to Friday. Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you guys.